Welcome to Growing Your Team, a podcast designed for small business owners seeking to grow their company with the help of employees and contractors. Your time is limited, which means growing and leveraging teams is essential for business success. The Growing Your Team podcast is the place to learn tips and techniques designed to help you know when it's the right time to hire, how to select perfect fit team members, and how to maximize productivity while creating a positive work environment. Drawing from her 10-plus years of leadership and hiring experience, here is your host, Jamie Van Kuyk.
Hello, Jamie Van Kuyk here, and welcome back to the Growing Your Team podcast. Today, I want to dive into a requirement that many people put on their job posting, but actually eliminates good qualified candidates. And this is a requirement that I've had conversations with a few of my clients multiple times. And every time we have one of these conversations, they're gung-ho about including it at first. But then as we talk about why it can hold back good quality candidates, they open up their minds and realize, let's try to post a job without it. And that requirement is education. Specifically having a bachelor's degree or higher. So before we talk about why we shouldn't always include an education requirement, let's talk about some of the reasons people do include an education requirement, or at least why they think they should. One is they want to see that someone has knowledge. Okay, I get that. But is a degree the only way to gain knowledge? Two, they sometimes see it as a way to prove that someone is dedicated. If they can get through a degree program, then they can be a good quality worker because it takes effort to graduate. Okay, once again, I can see value in that, but is having a degree the only way to measure that? So let's first address the fact that we automatically equate degree to knowledge. And yes, it makes sense on the surface. Someone has a degree, which means they went through an educational program and gained knowledge. However, when most people on job postings require a degree, they're not requiring a degree in a specific thing. Yes, they might suggest sometimes certain degree programs, for example, marketing, communications, or something similar, but a lot of the times out there, it just says bachelor's degree required. So the question becomes, if you want a degree because the person has knowledge, then doesn't the degree matter? So just saying that someone needs a bachelor's degree does not mean that they gained through that formal program any knowledge that is going to help them be successful in the role that you're hiring for. Yes, they might have learned professional skills. They might have grown in professional maturity, but it doesn't mean that they have the skill sets needed to do the role, especially if you're looking for something that requires a specific skill. The other thing I sometimes see around this with a degree is it says or equivalent knowledge. The question becomes, what is equivalent knowledge? How many years experience does it take for you to say they have what it's needed to do this position? One of the things I always like to ask somebody is when they're hiring for a position and they want to put a degree on there, I say, which candidate would be better? Someone who has 5 years experience doing this exact same role, or someone fresh out of college who has no experience, did not have an internship, but simply has a degree? 99% of the time, it's the person with experience. So unless you're hiring entry level and you're not expecting the person to have any experience, what is the degree giving you? Especially if you're not requiring a degree in a certain field. Now, I will back this up with saying there are certain positions that having degrees in certain industries or certain categories are going to make a candidate better. For example, there are certifications, there are degree programs, there are stuff that makes someone qualified because it's where the person goes and gets all the knowledge and sometimes hands-on knowledge that's going to make them succeed in the role. If you think about things, now obviously a lot of states and everything require certain licenses, so you can't hire someone in these categories without it, but think of like a nursing degree or someone graduating from a nursing program. That program is specifically designed to teach people how to be successful with the skills that are required to be a nurse. So though there are some industries, there are some positions where I can say, yes, having a certain degree is good or should be required. But a lot of it out there, once again, unless you're hiring for entry level, where you're saying this, where you're saying this college education is all that we care about, having a degree often doesn't matter. If you think about it the farther someone gets from their college education, the less those in-classroom learnings really matter, and the more the on-the-job learning matters. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying having a degree requirement is never good. I'm just saying a lot of the time, a degree does not equal the experience level that you're looking for, the knowledge level that you're looking for. Because yes, people might have book knowledge, but do they actually have practical knowledge? And if they have book knowledge in a topic that isn't connected to the role, is it worthy? Does it make them better than a candidate who has a lot of on-the-job training? And the other thing I talked about at the beginning is people like to look at a degree to say that someone is dedicated. If they could pass this program, they're going to be a great worker. Well, I can tell you, there are so many people out there who have a degree that are not a good quality worker. And there's people out there who do not have degrees that are amazing workers. So that doesn't always go hand in hand. And the best worker that you are going to find is the one that is right for your role, that they want to do what you're hiring for, that they're passionate about it, that they have the skills for it. So when they show up to work every day, they say, yes, this is the job for me. So if you want to find someone who's dedicated, you need to find that right fit for the role. And having a degree doesn't necessarily do it. Once again, as I mentioned, someone who has years of experience and has been dedicated to positions before should show that they're pretty dedicated over than just happening to stick with a career or degree program that maybe they didn't even like, but they did it because they had that financial investment in it, or maybe it was a push from a family member or something. So we need to look at things that actually show that someone is dedicated. And it's not always a degree. But as I mentioned at the beginning, when you look at a degree, you can weed out a lot of candidates that are great candidates. So there's a lot of people out there who couldn't afford to go to college. And part of the reason they couldn't afford to go to college is they didn't come from families where their parents are able to fund all or part of their education. And they didn't grow up in areas where maybe it was easy for them to get loans because they didn't really have a lot of support to get loans or other things that were really needed to complete that process. They grew up in a family where no one else had ever been to college, and there wasn't that push, wasn't that drive. It was you graduate high school, you go out and get a job. And they went out and got a good job, and they were good at that job. And then they move up in the ranks, and they continue to be good at that job. And then some of those people will then hit a wall, and people will say, well, you didn't get a degree 10 years ago, so you're no longer a good employee to us. And people will put a ceiling on those candidates. Why? Candidates that can do the job, that prove to you that they have the skills and qualities that are needed to succeed, shouldn't be stopped in a process because they don't hold a degree. Once again, unless there is a valid reason why a degree is required in that industry, and typically because there's governing boards or something along those lines that say people need to pass these tests, these certifications and everything in order to do these roles, a degree doesn't make someone more qualified. And we shouldn't hold people down in the career ladder because they didn't get a piece of paper years ago. Studies have shown that it's often a lot of the minority candidates that get held back in their career because they don't have a degree. And that's because you sometimes have immigrants and other people that are coming from first-generation households. Maybe they're the first person in their family to graduate high school in the United States. Sometimes, if they're the first person to graduate high school in the United States, their parents aren't even aware of the college process and everything within our country, which means they don't have people pushing them, but they have people saying, okay, you're an adult now, you're over the age of 18, you need to get a job and support yourself, support the family. And so that is what they're hearing at home, so they don't get that degree. And then we hold these people down in their career simply because they don't have a degree, no matter how much experience that they have. I want to give you an example of a client of mine. So this was a few months ago. We went through the hiring process. We talked about what was important for their candidate, what was their must-have criteria. And even though on the job description they provided me, it said a degree requirement, it had that line there. When I rewrote the job posting that we used, I did not include that. And the reason I didn't include a degree requirement was nothing they told me that was important about this candidate required a degree. We were looking for someone who had experience. This wasn't entry level. This was actually a pretty high level role within the company. They're a smaller company, so we're not talking about corporate executive, but a high position within this company, not entry level, and they needed experience. They needed tangible, hands-on experience in certain industries. So the candidate that made it to the top that they were considering offering the position to didn't have a degree. And all of a sudden, they realized that and they're like, whoa, what are we supposed to do here? We always talk about degrees. It's always a part of our job posting. And now this person doesn't have a degree. How are we supposed to explain that to the team? And I was like, well, you don't explain what the candidate doesn't have. You explain what the candidate does have. This person had 10 years of relevant experience. 10 years. And their original job posting said, bachelor's degree or equivalent experience. And I asked, how many years of experience does it take to get equivalent experience? And that they actually couldn't answer that. Because even though it was there, they never let themselves think about that because all they thought about was a degree. It was kind of a checking the box thing when their job search. Do you have a degree? Okay, you can move on. You don't have a degree? I don't care what else is in your resume. You're not moving forward. And once they realized that, once we looked at what this candidate had, all these accomplishments that we could share with the team of why this person was getting the position, it made them realize that a degree actually wasn't important. After that, they started going back and looking at some of their other job postings and realizing what was important and what wasn't, how they could go about and adjust things to make sure they weren't saying no to good quality candidates, that they weren't saying no to people who couldn't afford to go to college when they were 18, but went out and made a career for themselves despite that fact. It pains me when I hear stories, and I've heard this from candidates in when I've been interviewing them, as they're coming to, if I ask them, why are they leaving a position? And I've heard candidates say before, I grew up in the organization. I worked my way up from being the receptionist to being in this senior management position. And then I was told that I couldn't go any higher if I didn't have a degree. That it didn't matter what I had done for that company up to that point. Having a degree was the only way I could be qualified for the next step. And then they felt so disconnected and so hurt when the person who was hired for that next position, that next step above them that they were told they weren't qualified for, had a fraction of their experience. That they then had to teach that person how to do parts of their job because that person had never experienced those things in the work world, but they had a degree, and that's what mattered in the job hunt. So to wrap up, if you are going to include a requirement of a degree on a job posting, ask yourself why. Is a degree really important? Is it something that is really needed? And why is it needed? If you're not looking for something that shows that they have specific knowledge in a specific area, it might not really be needed. And you might actually be weeding out great candidates and leaving yourself with subpar candidates that you're not going to be happy with, that are not going to fulfill the roles and responsibilities, and you're going to feel like you're wasting your time. So find the right candidate for what you need and know that a degree is not always a mark of a perfect fit candidate. So find who you need, not simply who passed a course. Are you ready to hire a new team member for your business and you want to ensure you hire the person who can succeed in the role, make you happy, and positively impact your bottom line? Then set up time and let's talk, because this is exactly how I help business owners like you. When you go through my Hire framework, not only will you learn how to attract candidates who have the passion you desire, but you'll be able to identify and select candidates who have the skills you need and can succeed in the role. Going through this consulting process not only helps you find the right new hire for your current open position, but it teaches you how to repeat this process with every new position you add to your company as it continues to grow. So if you're a small business owner who is ready to hire, has a rough idea of the position you need to add, and you're tired of going through the hiring process only to end up with bad fitting team members, then let's talk. Send me an email at jamie@growingyourteam.com. That's Jamie, Jamie, @growingyourteam.com, or head on over to growingyourteam.com/jumpstart and let's talk about your hiring needs.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Growing Your Team with your host, Jamie Van Kuyk. Be sure to subscribe and head on over to growingyourteam.com to connect, access the show notes, and discover more ways to hire and leverage your perfect fit team.